Trump in general, his profile, he's a businessman.
Let's make America great again.
He absolutely does. So how do you do that? He's going to stimulate the economy in any which way he can, which we know historically has always kind of led to risk on type assets.
You could say that we're in a completely different market environment. ETFs are here. There's more steady hands at play. There's more derivatives in the market. So a lot of people hedging. Are we going to see a 30% drawdown? Is there another 15% to come? Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of the Crypto Catch Up with me, the lovely Tommy Honan.
Hello, how are you, sir?
Mate, I'm good. It's been it hasn't been that long actually.
I did a couple consecutively before Christmas.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing in the new year. So yeah, welcome back and welcome to everyone. Hello to everyone for New Year's.
Yeah.
And, excited to get back into it.
Any New Year's resolutions, mate?
Just the standard ones that I'm probably 2 days away from giving up, like with everyone else. No alcohol for a while, fitness, blah, blah, blah.
I've got the same too.
Yeah, that's right. I went back over my last 5 years of diaries and I think I lasted to the third week in January. So yeah, I'm on track for that probably again this year. But feeling good, feeling healthy. It's been a nice break. And markets were pretty hot prior to Christmas. Cooled off a little bit now, which I'm sure we'll get into today, but it's all very exciting.
Well, that's the rub. Like, obviously we were talking, I think it might even been us talking about a Santa Claus rally last time we were here. Obviously we've seen the opposite now, so I know in my circles it'd be good to get a sentiment check from yourself. I've had a lot of people just messaging me out of the blue that I haven't heard from since like October saying, should I sell? Is it over? So I think that's kind of going to be our central theme for this episode. Just what's our thoughts on that? Some pretty interesting news coming out as well. Maybe some more clarity towards the end of this month, which we'll touch on the back end of this episode on like why we think it could be a big catalyst coming towards the markets that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of. So stay tuned for that one. We'll make everyone wait for it as we should. But I mean, we should just kick it off really and just jump right into firstly, have you had anyone reaching out to you saying is it over? And what's
everyone?
What's been the reply?
The same people, I guess, that were reaching out when we saw Bitcoin initially breach kind of the 90s to 100s level are kind of back in now saying, hey, is it the narrative is starting to grow around the bull market being over.
Yep.
On one side of the fence, you have that, and then another side is a lot of people kind of waiting with bated breath around the Trump inauguration and how that kind of affects markets. And personally, I think it will give us some volatility. It is certainly a catalyst that a lot of people are expecting. Question mark: is it priced in already, or was it previously priced in when kind of in and around those decisions been made? So I guess short answer to that question is yes. A lot of people are definitely. I think there's some fear in the market at the moment, and that kind of rang true. I think the fear and greed index went back from like mid 80s all the way back to like 50 to like 60s at the moment.
That's where it's floating now.
Yeah, definitely people feeling it. From a positive perspective, I think the fact that Bitcoin is still between kind of 90 and 100 grand range and people are having this level of fear is a really, really good thing, right? It's a super positive thing. So
you bang on.
It's all about perspective. We have, people forget very quickly, including me and you, I'm sure.
Oh, man,
we forget
absolutely.
how quickly we went from 60K or the previous all-time high in around the 70 mark up to 100. Like it happened rapid fast. And it's always a perspective conversation, right? There's opportunity comes in market, but I guess, no one has a crystal ball. The reality is we could have already seen the top of the bull market. We don't know. We were expecting some sort of a momentum move or a blow-off top type of event. Pav, me and you've talked about these blow-off tops that we've seen in previous cycles that we didn't see in the last cycle at the top. So there's some nervousness around that in general.
Yeah.
What do you kind of see?
Well, I just want to touch on what you said in terms of like what, we've seen this before and what should we expect. I just went through, from top to bottom when we look at the month of January in other post-halving years. So the year after the halving, which we had last year, 2017, we saw a drawdown from the very top of January of 34%. In 2021, we saw 31%. And in 2025, we're currently sitting at 13%. So, I mean, you could say that we're in a completely different market environment. ETFs are here. There's more steady hands at play. There's more derivatives in the market. So a lot of people hedging. So Are we going to see a 30% drawdown? Is there another 15% to come? Like, I don't think any of us are going to know, and it's going to be a hindsight one, and everyone's going to tell you they're a genius when this is all sort of done and dusted, right, and we're moving into February. But look, I think for me, like, I think for me, the biggest piece is still the inauguration coming in. We saw what the Trump trade did for crypto when he got into, I guess, that president election got all sorted out. I kind of seem to think that once this sort of bit of stickiness is done, Trump trade 2.0 comes in as he's moving into office.
Second wave, second catalyst, yeah. And I think the narrative obviously has been growing around the Bitcoin strategic reserve. That also took a hit, if you want to call it that, in the last kind of week or so, with the current administration announcing that they were going to sell down 6.5 billion or so.
Was that the Silk Road stuff?
Yeah, I think it's basically, it was... I believe it represented around 20% or so of the amount that they hold. So it wasn't like they're selling down all of what they have, but they were selling down a portion or percentage, which, if you think about it, like, without being a maxi or a crypto bull or a Bitcoin bull, is probably a pretty reasonable thing to do, considering where the market's at and everything else. So if they were selling down everything, you'd kind of question that for sure, especially with all of the momentum we've seen in the market. But, and this is just looking at it objectively as a pure trade, not, thinking about government and their responsibilities.
Sure.
But it's, I think that's another narrative that is growing. And I think we see a lot more positive momentum in and around that, hopefully, when the inauguration happens and then post that. It's not going to happen overnight. So people are expecting these kind of short and sharp moves all the time, right? It's just not going to happen like that. We have a bit of a slow grind to go through now. That's my kind of perception on it.
I like that.
Historically, I know you touched on it before the podcast, Pav. Historically, Q1 bull market territory has always been really positive, so it's finished to the green side.
Yeah.
But January, we're kind of on track. January has often seen a cool down post Christmas. January, like, people are just getting back to work. Markets are still kind of starting to turn, right? So we're not in that quite hot spot yet. If this continued for the whole quarter, then we have to start having the conversation about what's happening with the market. Let's just say that we do cool off back into the 60s and 70s between now and the end of the quarter. That's a different conversation for me.
Yep. I kind of like that idea that from this chop, there'll be some slowing in momentum, and a lot of people probably find that that's the point where everyone gives up and sells, but that's usually when you see larger players.
And we look for this every cycle. It's great to trade in the bull market. It's great to, have conviction and build your positions in all types of markets. But essentially, the money is made in the bear markets. People don't like to hear that because it's really hard. It's like that whole meme of people buying Bitcoin at 100k and there's a big long queue, and then people buying it at 20k and there's nobody in the queue, right? So it's that whole concept every single time. Not every dip is for buying at the same time, but it really depends on how you're investing and what type of trading you're doing. Are you doing derivative trading, trying to buy up V-shaped short-term recoveries? Are you trading on spot where you're just building out your positions? There's a lot of different ways to do it. For the average person, it really comes down to what your conviction is on particular assets and how long your time frame is. That's really all that matters here. We know historically over a 3 to 5 year period, Bitcoin has performed the best asset essentially on the planet against fiat and against pretty much anything else. So that's the kind of TLDR takeaway generally.
No, I think, and to build on that point, obviously, like we'll jump right into like our first news story too. Like we're talking about not every dip is for buying, but when you have news headlines like 2 more US states eyeing off Bitcoin reserves, like it kind of tells you what the general conditions are sort of directionally pointing, right?
Yeah.
So
you've got states in the US, you've got countries adopting Bitcoin as some form of a standard or a strategic reserve. So these are not just moment in time catalysts. These are like long-term themes that are, it's like the domino effect from my perspective, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. But just to give some more context on those 2 more states, we've got New Hampshire just introducing legislation up to 10% of state treasury to be invested in cryptocurrencies, and North Dakota putting forward a proposal to invest into digital assets. It doesn't really specifically call out Bitcoin, but
they've left it open.
They have.
They've left it open.
But there's a nice little quote there. Cool. Basically saying changing economic conditions and emerging investment opportunities require a prudent investment of the state's financial resources. So pretty sensible sounding.
Just like take crypto out of it for a second. I wonder, like, has there similar types of news releases or like strategic positions been taken on other investment vehicles over the years. Like we're kind of hearing it all about strategic reserves around crypto at the moment, but I don't know. I guess it's more of a question like, is this unique to the crypto space because it's a new and emerging asset opportunity?
There was gold back in the day,
gold,
or even
gold,
recently.
Of course.
Just recently, just constantly cycles through, periods of accumulation and selling and refinancing and all that jazz.
I just think it's interesting. Like,
it is, yeah.
Does a country come out and say, again, taking crypto away from it? Is it like, are they going to invest in a new commodity that has been discovered, or something like that? Is it in the same type of bracket? It's like, it's an interesting concept to think about.
Well, we see a lot of noise coming out of the US. Do you kind of see this spilling over into other countries?
The strategic reserve conversation, it'll spill over and then some.
Then some.
Yeah,
what's then some look like?
Well, I mean, the US is just a real big market opportunity, right? So I think
huge.
The US moves the market. We know where that's where all the value is, or a large chunk of the value at least.
Yep.
Yeah, I think there's been some kind of Twitter posts or X posts around, would Australia consider something similar, or how far away they would be? Are there European Union countries that would consider it? I think you're going to see that play out. And I think sooner rather than later, especially now that we have licensed kind of, traditional finance type products in market. So,
well, that's a good next point too. So obviously, talk about licensing and, there's a little bit of a regulation leg to that whole strategic reserve being common practice. There was a recent partial win for Coinbase over an SEC ruling recently. A panel of judges said it would not force the SEC to implement rulemaking on crypto. And basically had a quote along the lines of, "We properly remand to the SEC to explain itself. It should not give yet another poor explanation in an already long line of them," when referencing just the allegations made on regulating crypto. So, I mean, I don't know. How many more times are we going to hear this, right?
I'm thinking back to the judges' comments around the SEC and Gensler coming out against the crypto exchanges, and they talk about arbitrary and capricious was the quote that they took from the headline. I was actually listening to Bankless podcast. I don't know if you know the guys. They're kind of ETH bulls, US guys. They were talking about like Operation Choke Point, and that whole, basically it was the name given to the movement by the SEC and other bodies in the US to stifle the growth of crypto and kind of stop it in its tracks almost. And they just had some comments around basically validating that, we're not just paranoid about the government coming after us or these organizations coming after us. This was their words. That there was actually like fact. There was in writing statements from, I think it was the DOJ and the FDIC and the SEC towards specific companies saying, stop offering crypto products pretty much, or else, which is like, you can't get any more on the cold face, and also telling the banking institutions not to service customers. So, it's an interesting conversation that I think hopefully with the new administration in the US, turns a different way for us. And I think that a lot of people are definitely betting on that wave and that whole sentiment changing. It won't be short term, but over the longer term, we got 4 years with Mr. Trump. So it's going to be a very, we all know Trump in general, his profile, he's a businessman. He wants to
make America great again.
He wants to make America great again. He absolutely does.
Commercially.
So how do you do that, fiscal policy.
Big one.
We think there's going to be a fair bit of money printing. He's going to stimulate the economy in any which way he can, which we know generally or historically has always kind of led to risk on type assets, which is crypto space. Is definitely we're hot in there.
Well, definitely on the macro front, like you've probably seen it yourself, the US dollar. There's an index you can follow called the DXY, which basically compares the US dollar's strength against other global currencies. It's hitting highs it hasn't seen since 2022. So we're talking back in the bear market.
Basically, there's room for printing.
in his last presidential cycle, obviously this is going to be second term. Like he tweeted the dollar's too strong. Right. And then the next weeks, it just started to fall off a cliff and on risk assets and everything just went wild. So that's the kind of thing I think we're dealing with this cycle, particularly with Mr. Trump. Obviously, a tweet can change it all and it can happen very quickly. So it is interesting to see how quickly everyone's sort of sentiment has shifted these last couple of weeks. There was some macro data that didn't come out quite so great the last couple of weeks. everyone's gone from, oh, there's going to be rate cuts in 2025 to now there's no rate cuts. It just seems very irrational. So I still think to exactly what you're saying as well. We'll get that inauguration, get some clarity, and then everyone stops thinking and just listens.
And that's what we're seeing in the market at the moment.
Yeah.
Uncertainty.
Yep.
You know, what happens in uncertainty? People either sell everything, and or they just do nothing. Yep. And we're kind of seeing a mix of the two play out from like over the last kind of couple of six weeks or so, I think. So yeah, interesting.
It is, and it gets even more interesting as well. Obviously, the last news story we've got really to cover, and we sort of mentioned on the top of this show that something that probably a lot of people aren't aware of, FTX. So there's a name we probably haven't heard in a while.
Didn't want to hear much about it for a while.
No, but now obviously they're looking to come good on distributing those funds back to users. There's a lot of people owed. I guess maybe what they would consider an insignificant amount as to what it could be. Obviously, they've taken valuations from the bottom of the bear market.
Yeah.
Returning those funds back to users, but the distribution basically is looking to start over the next 30 days, purportedly. So the ranging valuation of the cash to be settled across Coinbase and Kraken exchanges to these users is in the vicinity of $14 to $16 billion. So again, we're looking at cash coming back into people's hands.
Liquidity injection.
Bit different to the Mt. Gox situation where people were getting Bitcoin in kind. Now they're getting cash. So exactly what you said, right? A lot of people with cash. Yeah. Do they have the appetite to go for a round two? Or do you think a lot of people might be scared of crypto now?
Oh, it's a great question, right?
Yeah.
I think you got to assume that crypto investors, we're on a different profile spectrum anyway. I would say 75%, and this is just me pulling a number right now. When I think about, when I'm trying to think about it rationally, I think 75% of those people, that might be a bit high, I don't know what you think, but will invest in crypto again. I think they'll look for opportunities. The hard part for me, if I was one of those, and I'm not, thankfully, and I know there are Australian investors right now probably listening to this and expecting their payday very soon, thinking about how they would approach it. You're obviously feeling discounted to a degree because I bought Bitcoin at say 15 grand.
Would have been like around that, right?
No, I'm getting some cash back, and so you're kind of probably naturally looking for a lower entry.
Yeah.
So are they sitting on their hands to a degree? I think you absolutely have some of that, but again, within the next 6 months, I think you see 75% of that capital coming back into the market in some way, shape, or form. That's kind of what I think right now. You're asking me the question right now. But I think there's definitely a percentage, 25 to 30% of people would probably just say, no, I'm done. I'm done with that. Or people just need the money for other things, right? Life happens. And
absolutely.
That's kind of where I sit on it at the moment. But I guess, it's a liquidity injection back into the market.
Huge cash wave, right?
Yeah. And it's obviously, it's obviously not the absolute best outcome for users. They would have wanted their assets back, but it's still a pretty good outcome. I think they're getting slightly over capitalized as well, right?
So it's
a little bit more than 100%.
$1.19 back for every dollar as of the snapshot in whatever date in November it was. Yeah.
So they're getting 9% growth on their portfolio over a, what would you call it, a 2-year period?
So 2022? Yeah, 2022 November.
It beats the S&P over a 2-year period or probably.
Probably since then. And it's a very large sum if that is the final sum. Like I still think we need to see the official paperwork come out and whatever have you. But, we talk about the US right now, $6 billion they want to sell. Well, there's some buyers right there for you, right?
Sure.
So in terms of what the market could take, it seems like it's a bit more shoring, I guess, from a confidence perspective for me. But the only thing I would think is like exactly to what you said, that psychology of like, what you had and what it was worth. And well, how does that affect the investor's sentiment? I know from historically speaking, when I speak to people, they go chasing meme coins because it goes up faster.
I get you. Yeah. So they feel like the Bitcoin, if it was Bitcoin and Ethereum, Bitcoin as an example, they feel like it's too slow moving now.
Maybe.
It's glacial. But some people, you still get this, I still get this every day. Has Bitcoin, is it done? Has it already had its moment in the sun, or has
it too expensive?
It's already, exactly. Yeah. We hear this every single time. we get the same comment.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very good point, because I think you are going to people that think that way. They're going to go, all right, what's the next thing I can get in on the floor of, or something that hasn't had that capital growth as much. So I think it's a very, very, very good point. But keen to see how it plays out, and hopefully, a lot of those Aussie investors. I don't know what the distribution kind of phases look like, or the time.
It is staggered from the very little I understand about it. But I do probably need to sit down and go through the paperwork, or get ChatGPT to do it for me.
Yep.
But it'd be somewhat of a staged piece.
I think just like one more point on that is, I think in the short term people will be indecisive about how they approach it. But like over the course of, say, Trump's 4 years, I think 100% of those people go back in.
Oh yeah.
So in the short term, I think it'll be over the next 6 months, it'll be a lot less.
Yep.
Jumping in head first for those investors or people in general in the market.
Maybe a bit of DCA instead.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
I think that's a good point to finish on too. So what are you doing right now? Looking at the market, are you sort of sitting on your hands or doing what you usually do? Anything different? Yeah,
look, I've got my trigger orders are set up, my buying of the dip at certain levels. So I haven't really touched anything on that side. But really just building out those high conviction spot positions at the moment. That's what I'm up to.
Nice, dude.
What about you?
For me, I took my own advice at the end of last year and did nothing. But I'm looking to obviously start looking at everything again. I'll lie, I did do a bit of DCAing last night. But I think as we've sort of spoken to everything so far, just as the momentum looks like it's shifting back to the upside as more becomes clear, hopefully towards the end of January might give me more of a reason to get active again. But right now, just taking it easy.
Yeah. If you were to speculate on like what happens post inauguration at this point, do you have a view on that? Or
I absolutely think
it's hard.
Well, I think the market's got a muscle memory for the impact that something like the Trump trade had.
Got it.
So I've just got this overarching feeling that as soon as something else as a catalyst falls into line, everyone's going to start just pricing in Trump trade 2.0 because everyone's seen what that did last time, and the market likes to go off what it knows recently, right? There's a little bit of recency bias. So there's a lot to happen for that to take place. So a good one is like we've got inflation coming out. So this podcast will come out Thursday, but this whole week is quite a big news week for macro.
Yeah.
So if anything comes in line with expectations, because there's fear that we're going to blow out, it's going to be hot inflation again. I think that sort of sets us up a nice little foothold, sort of sentiment wise, that we could start to see the grind higher, like we're talking about.
Yep.
But if we see poor data again, it just sends us lower. So that's a good reason for me to sit steady.
There's one thing I want to leave people on that I kind of touched on, Pav, with you before this.
Yep.
And this is like kind of like a PSA type announcement, I guess, like wallet hygiene and private key management.
Yeah.
Not the sexiest of topics for most people, but it is super important. And the reason I'm talking about this now is we've seen some kind of pretty scary and emerging stories around the California fires.
From the fires?
From the fires.
Okay.
Basically, we're hearing stories of people that have, had their private keys held in their house, or they've managed somewhere like that, basically losing all of their crypto based on that. And look, that's probably the last of their worries with respect to the issues that are happening over there. It's a terrible kind of situation.
Yep.
But I guess it just got me thinking about private key management in general. And I know most people hold their private keys in their bedroom, in their bottom drawer, or they have a safe in their house, or they have something like that. And that's something that I would encourage people to think about. Yep. Your house is not, I would say, a limited supply. I was going to try and get a Bitcoin kind of phrase in there somewhere.
It's not
your house is there today, but it's not sure tomorrow, right? Yep. So I guess I think about how I do things, and it's just something I wanted to touch on with people. If you are holding, the private keys to, could be millions of dollars worth of crypto sitting in your bottom drawer at home, have a think about splitting that private key. Something I do is I actually hold part of it in a bank safety deposit box. And I've also got a backup over back in Ireland in Europe, which is just, not everyone is going to do it, but I just kind of wanted to call it out as it's kind of quite topical at the moment. We've forever heard stories about private key issues, people mismanaging them, X, Y, and Z. This kind of is just shining another spotlight on it. So I don't know. It's more of just a PSA. People may or may not want to act on it, but just something to think about.
No, it's a good shout out. I didn't even think about that. But
yeah, and it's you don't think about it until something happens usually. Yeah. And a lot of people now, especially with the growth of crypto and the sector, are people holding balances on their ledgers and Trezors or whatever else. It could be all gone if something like that was to happen. So, really think about how you're managing those. At a minimum, hold a backup in a secondary location. So, yeah, leaving people with that. Not a somber one, but more just of a bit of a thought
reminder
point. Yeah. So, I think that's us.
That's us. Thanks, Tommy. Thanks
man.
everyone for tuning in.
Yeah.
We're back again with the regular weekly programming, and hopefully, Ted will be back eventually. We'll see if you're free again next week.
See how he is. How he is after his big trip.
Yeah, I think he'll be pretty knackered.
He will. He'll be tired.
Yeah,
we'll drag it out of him.
Yeah, we will.
Thanks, guys.